Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, we're in the studio. We are live, so get involved in the chat and the comments. We are going to be talking about all things Manchester United and what is happening with Erik Ten Hag. That is what the bulk of the stories are focusing on this morning. There's all rumours about players knowing that he's going to get the sack, Ruud van Nistelrooy waiting in the wings, other managers being looked at. Rumours are all over the place with who could be in the managerial hot seat in the very near future. There's even suggestions that Erik Ten Hag might not even be done for yet. He may still be able to salvage his job. So make sure you are letting us know what you think by hitting that like button, as well as getting involved in the chat and the comments. Loads of people already in the comments. Someone says, Mark Smith says, bit late, boys. Sorry, yeah, we are a little bit late, though by our standards. This is actually early. Mean Hoytland says, morning Jay. Jay Sparrow, morning Jay. Free Gold says, sack the snotty egg. I don't know if you're referring to me or Erik Ten Hag. Josh Worsfold says, love the content, Jay. Brian Casey, morning Jay. Adit says, sign Wenger. There's an interesting suggestion. I don't know if that one will work. I don't even know if you're being serious. Let's talk about some of these stories there then, even. The Daily Mail have got one here. This is on this. You can see that. That's from... We've got a tweet there from Neil Henderson, who's a City fan, if you care. But he does tomorrow's papers today. He's one of the team that do tomorrow's papers today. So every night they tweet out the front and back pages from the national newspapers and even some of the local ones. And you can see here, this is from the Mail, and it's from Chris Wheeler and Sammy Mockbell. Chris, who we've had on the channel, I was just chatting to him this morning, funnily enough. He's ran this story with Sammy saying, United stars expect Ten Hag to get the sack. They fear it's too late to stop the rot as huge week looms. Obviously, the manager is under a lot of pressure. Many people, or most people, seem to think he's already done for. There are some slight suggestions that if, and it's a big if, you can get a result against Porto and Aston Villa, then maybe that'll give Ineos pause for thought. We know that Ineos have sort of been briefing and saying that they are backing this manager, they are supportive of him, but when you've had the run of results we've had, especially on the season we had last season, it doesn't bode well for this manager. I wouldn't be surprised, and I kind of expect him to go in the international break. But I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again. I don't know anything. I'm not ITK. So they're saying the players expect him to be sacked. That's another issue that Erik Ten Hag has got. It's not just that fans are sort of saying they either expect him to be sacked or probably want him to be sacked, although there are some that are still backing him, even on this channel. Let's not forget that. But if you've got the squad and the players looking at him as a dead man walking, that's not consistent with running a successful team or a club. You can't have that when players are thinking to themselves, this manager's going to be gone very soon. Look at what happened with Ralf Rangnick. There was always this sort of argument being put forward, and it seems to have some merit to it, that the players didn't respond to Ralf Rangnick, A, because they didn't like his style and his sort of the way he managed the team, and B, because they knew he was going soon. He's only here for 7 months. So even if we don't listen to this guy, even if we don't perform as well as we can do for this guy, he's going to be gone soon anyway. Now, I'm not justifying that. I think it's a disgraceful attitude to have. I think every time you step onto that pitch, as a Manchester United player, you should give your all, regardless of who the manager is and whether you like him or not. But the cold, hard facts are that the players didn't respond to Ralf Rangnick. And if they think Erik Ten Hag's going, they may not respond to him in the way they should. And it's sad, but it's true. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Erik Ten Hag is going to go? Do you think he should go? Do you think the players are right to expect him to be sacked? I want to hear what you guys think. What Doesn't Kill You says, I've tried to stay Ten Hag in, but I'm struggling now. I feel your pain, my brother. I'm exactly the same. Hi Joe says, get Keno in, not as manager, just to give all our D-head players a slap. I edited that because it's early morning. Can Sean says sack Rashford? Well, I don't think that's going to happen. Brian Casey says 70% of the team are now his players. We back Ten Hag, then the new manager inherits his squad along with Louis and Ollie players. Just another rinse, repeat cycle. This is what happens at Manchester United. It's a good point by Brian, because we've seen this time and time again, haven't we? Where a manager will come in and he'll sign certain players. So Moyes signed Mata and Fellaini. He didn't really sign many, but then Van Gaal came in and he signed a lot of players, or a lot of players were signed on his watch. So you had the likes of Di Maria, Memphis Depay, you had Morgan Schneiderlin, Bastian Schweinsteiger, Ander Herrera, Luke Shaw. All these players came in. And then when Jose Mourinho came in after Louis van Gaal, some of those players he just didn't want. He didn't want Memphis Depay. He didn't want Bastian Schweinsteiger. He didn't rate them at all. He didn't even give them a chance. He was just like, I don't want these guys. They're nothing to do with me. I didn't sign them. He brings in the likes of Romelu Lukaku, likes of Alexis Sanchez. When Ole comes in, he makes it pretty clear he doesn't like or doesn't fancy Alexis Sanchez or Romelu Lukaku. I know Lukaku got some games under him, but it was obvious he wasn't his guy and he didn't really want him. So then he brings in his own players. He starts making signings and bringing all the players that he really wants. Then Erik Ten Hag comes in and he's looking at it and he's going, okay, do I want some of these players that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer signed? No. He starts bringing in his own players as well. So I get this point of you just going through this sort of cycle. But the short and long of it is, you can't just stick with a manager who's the wrong manager. You can't just say, well, we can't keep going through this cycle. And I'm not saying Brian's saying this, this is my point I'm making, of saying, well, we can't just keep sacking managers. Well, if there's the wrong manager, you have to. You can't just stick with him. You can't have this ethos of, we're not going to sack managers anymore. Well, sooner or later, you have to. Imagine if we'd have said that about Ron Atkinson. We're not going to sack managers. We don't do that. We sacked Sexton. We sacked Doherty. We sacked Franco Farrell. We sacked Wilf McGuinness. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to stick with Ron Atkinson. We're not going to bother getting Sir Alex Ferguson in, or Alex Ferguson as he was known then. Now, obviously, that's a bit of an extreme point I'm making, but you get the idea behind it. So I think you have to ask yourself the question, do you think Erik Ten Hag is the right man for the job? Forget all this sort of romanticised view of Manchester United. Manchester United have always sacked managers. This is another thing. We always have. The only difference between Manchester United and practically any other club ever is that we have got two managerial geniuses that worked at our club for a very long length of time as well. You had Sir Matt Busby, who took over just after the Second World War until, what was it, the early 70s. And then you had, or the late 60s, I should say, late 60s, early 70s. And then you had Sir Alex Ferguson, who came in 86 and lasted till retired in 2013. Now, you've got these two managers who, for me, are probably the two greatest managers ever. Like, genuinely, I genuinely believe that. But in between those, and after Fergie, you've got manager after manager after manager lasting 2, 3, not even that years, getting sacked. Look at what happened after Busby. We went through all those managers. Was it McGuinness, Franco Farrell, Dave Sexton, Tommy Doherty, Ron Atkinson? After Fergie, you've had Moyes, Van Gaal, Jose, Ragnick, Ole. Must forgot Ole Gunnar Solskjaer then. Erik Ten Hag. So it's not like this idea that Manchester United don't or shouldn't sack managers. We do that. The fact is, you've got to get the right one. Now, I'm not expecting you to get a Matt Busby or Sir Alex Ferguson. Those managers come around once every 100 years. But you can get a good manager. You can get a manager that wins you the league. My question to you guys is, do you think Erik Ten Hag is that manager? Can he win us a title? I am sick to death of Manchester United having to just be in and around the top 4. That's the goal. That's the aim. That's where we're at. Or even when we finish second. We finished second twice in a post Sir Alex Ferguson, and both times it's been a distant second. It's not been a title race, really. The title race is ended by Christmas or New Year, and it's just been City's procession. I want to see us in a proper title race. Get involved in the chat in the comments and let us know what you think. Hit that like button as well, please, people. Loads of comments here. Tariq Amazing says Erik Ten Hag has to go. Chris Lee says the doc was on the right track. He got sacked for other reasons, though, didn't he? Richard Porter says, who would you take instead if Erik Ten Hag went, Jay? Part of me feels like Ruud might be a safe pair of hands just as a caretaker job until someone else comes in. Part of me thinks maybe you've got to look a little bit left field. There are links with Inzaghi. We'll get into that in a minute. I think Ruben Amorim is another name that's been suggested. I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is. Lee Bain says he's not right for us. I don't like saying that either. My main worry is I don't want to get rid of Erik Ten Hag and replace him with someone like Gareth Southgate. That would be insane. Let's talk about The Guardian. This is Jamie Jackson, I think it is. Erik Ten Hag's Manchester United future. Hands in the balance for the next 2 games. Dutchman expected to stay for the next 2 matches at least. Defeats of Porto or Villa could result in his removal. This is another issue, right? And I like Jamie, he's a good mate, and he sorts a lot of sense, and I agree with what he's saying. But you cannot have a manager who is constantly 1 game away from the sack. Erik Ten Hag has been 1 game away from the sack since the FA Cup semi-final. If we'd have lost that game, I think he'd have gone. Genuinely. Now, we didn't, and he didn't. But then you go fast forward to the final. I think if we lost that game, I think he'd have probably been sacked. Then you get to this season. I think had we lost the opening game at Fulham, I don't think he'd have been sacked, but I think he'd been in a lot of pressure losing your opening game at home to Fulham. After the results we've had, it now seems that, I said before the Spurs game, he had to win that. He didn't. Looks like he could be getting a sack off the back of that game. If not, Now it's Porto. If he loses to Porto, he'll probably get the sack. If he loses to Villa, he'll probably get the sack. You can't sustain that. It's completely untenable. You need a manager who's got a little bit of breathing space, who's not just constantly going into every game like it's a cup final, like if I don't win this game, I'm going to get sacked. And it feels a little bit like that's where we're at. And that, for me, is not consistent with a successful football team at all. Now, I want Erik Ten Hag to succeed, and I wanted him to succeed. I just think that ship sailed. I do. I genuinely think he's done for. You may disagree. Let me know what you think. Hit that like button as well, please, people. You might not like the state of Manchester United, but you can like this video. I mean, it says it all last night. I was watching a little bit of Bournemouth versus Southampton because, you know, that's how I roll. And then, you know, it transpires that when Bournemouth were winning, they win 3-1. I can't remember. I turned it off after a while. I got fed up. The United are now down at 13th. It's like, what? I'm watching someone that should have nothing to do with United, and it's still making me angry because we're pushing us further down the table. I mean, it's just getting a bit silly, isn't it? Fergal McClement says, fair play to you for having the motivation to speak and research United at the minute. Barely want to watch them. Hydro says, Groundhog Day FC. What doesn't kill you says, for me, it's not the manager. Too many players down tools when they're not happy. If I did that in my job, I'd be fired. We need to drop players who aren't fighting for the badge. I understand that. I understand that point of view, and it annoys me when I see players I don't think are giving their all. And we saw a little bit of that against Spurs, didn't we? Players not doing everything they should be doing. But it's almost impossible to drop everyone. If you've got a lot of players who aren't playing as well as you should be, which United have, you can't drop them all. Maybe you could and just play the kids, but that's not going to work, is it? I think the obvious thing to do there is you bring in a manager who can motivate these players, and that isn't right. The players should be motivated, as I said earlier. Anytime you put on a Manchester United shirt and step onto that pitch, you should give your all. But the fact of the matter is they aren't. And maybe you need a new manager to come in, and maybe you need a new manager who didn't sign some of these players. That's another problem you've got. You look at some of these players who you don't think are good enough. Erik Ten Hag signed some of them. Look at Anthony. People often forget that. We've got a player we spent 80 million quid on who doesn't even get a kick in the Premier League anymore because he ain't good enough. And the manager who bought him knows he ain't good enough. That's insane. But that's where we're at. And Erik Ten Hag might one day turn to Anthony. He might say, okay, you know, give you a chance. He played him against Barnsley, I think. But it looks like he's kind of giving up on him. And that's a bit... My point here is, a new manager comes in and he doesn't care how much you spent on him. Now, Erik Ten Hag doesn't care about Anthony, but he might have some players that he's brought in that he's not sure about anymore, but he's got to sort of give him a chance because he's bought them and he can't drop everyone he's bought. A new manager doesn't care about that. Maybe you need an element of that. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Tom Cook says, many players under 25 looking up to Rashford, Shaw, Bruno leadership team. They're the problem. I do admit that. I do agree with that, sorry. I don't think we've got a core leadership group in this team that inspires you. I think you need that in any team. You remember when Chelsea... Well, they still do it, so remember when. But remember when Chelsea used to sack managers every 2 years and yet they'd still win titles in Champions Leagues? They did, didn't they? They'd go through managers like no one else did. And you'd have a manager who'd come in like, and look at some of the managers they got rid of. Jose won a title and he was sacked 6 months later. Carlo Ancelotti finished second, right, after winning a double the year before, and they sacked him. Carlo Ancelotti, they were lucky to have him, and they got rid of him. And then after that, they still carry on and have some success. The reason Chelsea used to have success is not because they kept sacking managers. It was because they had a core group of players that you could kind of rely on, that was sort of a leadership group and that could help carry that team forward. And they were all sort of in and around being world class. So you had players like Petr, you had players like Frank Lampard, you had players like Ashley Cole, you had players like Didier Drogba, or maybe you brought in someone like Diego Costa or Eden Hazard or N'Golo Kante. They always seem to have world class players who were also leaders. And then you can get away with rotating managers almost constantly because you've still got the core of a really strong squad. I think we're lacking a little bit of that at Manchester United. I think we've got good players, very good players on their day. I always say this, on their day, FC. On our day, we can beat anyone. Hence the reason we've won 2 trophies in 2 years. If you need this team to step up against a Liverpool or a City, they can do it in a one-off. Can they step up consistently, though, week in, week out, and get you up that table? No, they can't. Because right now we're sat in 13th and last season we finished 8th. There's a reason for that. And it's just lack of consistency. Yes, you can blame injuries last season, and I use that excuse myself, or that reasoning you should say, but you can't keep saying that. And you can't say that when you look at this weekend. Yes, we're missing Luke Shaw, but Tottenham were missing Heung-min Son. We had a pretty strong team that we fielded, and we were terrible before the red card, I hasten to add. Jacob Leaf says, we keep living the same 3 years. It's actually insane, and you're part of it. Congratulations. Thank you. No worries. I'll try and play better next week. Abhinav Verma says, I think we need to have different plans for top 6 and bottom 13. Sean Easton says, all those years of suffering as a Scouser when you had Sir Alex are now paying haters dividends. Erik Ten Hag leading Manchester United to levels people in Liverpool could only have dreamed of. I mean, that says it all out, doesn't it? Let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about Ruud van Nistelrooy. It looks like Ruud van Nistelrooy is being heavily linked, as you'd expect, and it looks like he's open to joining the becoming manager. Who's this from, sorry? Sportwinner, sorry, you said it there on the list, forgive me. Sportwinner is saying here, according to Dutch journalist Valentin Drijzen, Ten Hag's assistant Ruud van Nistelrooy could replace him at Manchester United. Drijzen was one of the guests on Van Dag Inside, where they discussed Manchester United's situation under the former Ajax manager. So yeah, it looks like he's saying, look, Ruud van Nistelrooy, you can see there's more comments here. I think Van Nistelrooy is open to it, and that could be possible because the dream candidate is, of course, not there. Van Nistelrooy comes from the club and is already well regarded by the players, someone who has played football at the top, also at United. So it makes sense. I've been saying this for months. I was asked a few times about who I think, if Ten Hag goes, who I think would replace him this season, if it didn't work out this season, because I kept saying that Erik Ten Hag needs to have a good start to the season. Who would replace him? And I said, I think Ruud van Nistelrooy is the obvious answer. He's a player that obviously is loved by the fans because of what he did as a player. He's got managerial pedigree because of what he did at PSV. And he knows the club and he's already there. Now that can count against you because you can say, well, he was there. He was part of this coaching staff that's been a failure. But only this season, not last season. And that can kind of help you a bit because last season in the Premier League was a shambles. But he wasn't part of that. So Ruud van Nistelrooy seems like a logical step for me. Let me know what you think. Rumon Samad says, Tuchel, discuss this, guys. Thomas Tuchel, the issue with that is, didn't you interview him? Didn't we interview him last season? So you're going to interview him and say, and then somehow, whatever the reason he didn't come, is going to be resolved. Now, there were reports that it was the club that didn't want him. There was other reports that it was the Tuchel himself who didn't fancy it. Can they sort out those differences? Maybe, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat. Michael Lyon says, is it worth expecting a similar league position this year and hoping for a click to happen next year for the big push? Rome wasn't built in a day. How many times, though, do we write off a season? How many times do we have to write off a season? Like, we're in September. Well, we're not. We've just got into October. It's the 1st of October. I'm not having to go at you for asking that. But we're already at the stage where it's like, was this season a bit of a write-off? Why? What, we're 6 games in? It shouldn't be in the Premier League. It shouldn't be a write-off. No, we should not be writing off this season. We should still be aiming to get into the Champions League next season. That was probably the goal, if we're being honest, this season. And it still should be. Let me know what you think. Let's talk about Inzaghi. You can see here, this is from, I think this is the Star there. I mean, they do love a nice, like, sort of headline, don't they? The Star. It says, Inz out, shake it all about. So obviously this is about Simone Inzaghi, who's the manager at Inter Milan, being linked with the United job. It says Inter boss top target is Erik's future looks grim. I mean, I've just have a look at the Serie A table. How are they getting on at the minute? I think they're about 4th, aren't they? Yeah, the 4th. They've half decent start. 3 wins, 2 draws, and a loss so far this season. I mean, it's still only early days, early to tell. Inzaghi, he is an option if you look at what he's done as a manager. Obviously, the big achievement, I think, was, well, there's 2 big achievements. There's obviously winning Serie A last season, wasn't it? And also getting to the Champions League final a couple of seasons ago against Manchester City, where they were unlucky. I thought Inter were probably the better team in that game. I'm not just saying that because I'm a bitter United fan. But I thought they were. I thought they probably should have won that game. So, could he be the option? Would he come? Would he want to join Manchester United? Manchester United, no disrespect to Inter, but are a bigger club. But would that happen? We'll have to wait and see. Steve, I've lost that one. Sorry, I think it was Steve Muller just saying Rude. Asim Han says, Ten Hag, Rashford need to leave ASAP. Keith Kelly says, Ruud till May, Nagelsmann next summer. Brian Casey says, Nagelsmann is probably the only manager that I would want to replace Erik Ten Hag, but he's not available right now. Red Lad says, Ronaldo, Brown and Scotty have got to Jay shake my head. Ronaldo, Brown and Scotty have been saying for a little while they didn't think Erik Ten Hag was the right man for the job. I'm sorry, that performance against Spurs, just, I think for me, showed that this isn't going to have a happy ending. And I said before the game, I've been saying leading up to it, I said, look at the Palace, Southampton and Spurs games, you need to take 7 points from those games. I said going into the Spurs game, it's a must-win game. And to lose, and lose in the manner we did, and don't be coming at me with the red card, we were terrible before the red card. And just to see the sort of the atmosphere there amongst the players, they all look dejected, the manager looks down, I just think he's done. I do. You may disagree, and if you do disagree, get involved in the chat and the comments. My default setting is to back a manager. I have always done that, but I just don't think this is going to work out. I really don't. I'm sorry. You might disagree, but you know, if you do, let me know. Let me know why you think he's gonna be successful. Let me know why you think Erik Ten Hag is the right man for the job to turn this around. And you know what? I hope you're right. I hope he does. I just don't see it happening. Let's talk about Adam Crafton. Again, he's been on the channel a few times. Good lad, he's had him. Says, I don't understand the who is out there argument in relation to Ten Hag. Clubs often don't get ideal first choice candidates. Neither Slot nor Postecoglou were. United are epically bad under Ten Hag over an extended period of time. The idea there's no one better is absurd. I kind of agree with that. I kind of think, like, there was a stat doing the rounds, I think. Is it that Everton have taken more points out of the last 15 games, whatever it is, than we have? I mean, come on, man. I'm not saying we should get Sean Dyche, by the way. That'd be ludicrous. But that shows you how bad it has been at Manchester United. I mean, last season, I gave this manager, personally, I'm not like I'm in charge of anything, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt when it came to injuries. I said, look at the amount of injuries we've had. So I can forgive that season. I can forgive that 8th place finish, especially when you throw in the fact we won the FA Cup, which was phenomenal. It was that you know, beating Liverpool and ruining Klopp's farewell tour, and then winning the final against City was just great, and the performance against City was fantastic. But we needed to have a good start this season. And last season was awful in the league. Losing at home to Fulham and Brighton and Bournemouth, and let's not, forget about the likes of Arsenal and City. It was just atrocious. The Champions League campaign was a disaster. So you think, okay, we need to improve this season. And we haven't. We haven't, have we? Let's be honest. And you can make some excuses, and I've done it. You can say we were lucky against Brighton, that disallowed goal was a bit of a turning point. It could have gone either way. You can say we were a better team against Crystal Palace, because we were. But we lost against Brighton. We drew against Crystal Palace. We lost at home to Liverpool 3-0. And then we lost again 3-0 at home to Spurs. That's unacceptable, man. Can't keep excusing it. I'm sorry, I can't. You might think it's going to have a happy ending on Erik Ten Hag. I just don't, and I kind of agree with Adam. I think there's options out there. And it might not even be a case of I know the options. Manchester United as a football institution should know. They should have a list. They were interviewing everyone last season. They must have a list of people they think could take over from Erik Ten Hag if things go wrong. Surely they're not going, well, if Erik Ten Hag don't work out, we don't know anyone. We're done. We interviewed Tuchel and Thomas Frank, and that's it. We haven't got anyone else. Come on, man. This is another story as well. I think this is from The Athletic. This is Andy Mitten. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but someone we trust, someone we've had on the channel. And he says, reveals Man United players have issues with Ten Hag's playing style. An hour after the FA Cup final, I spoke to half a dozen of United players outside the dressing room and asked them about the manager. The words weren't being recorded. Not one said the manager should absolutely be sacked, and not one said he should absolutely stay. Yet there were clear issues between players and managers about his style. One of them said, you cannot have teams in the relegation zone like Sheffield United and Burnley coming to Old Trafford and carving us open. He's hardly a sort of sensationalist journalist, is he? Andy Mitten. He's hardly someone as well who doesn't get behind the team and the manager. He straddles both lines of being a diehard fan and a journalist. So he's not trying to cause trouble there, Andy Mitten. And he's not someone you'd go, oh, well, he would say that. Well, he wouldn't, would he? He's not making it up. He's very, very reliable. So if the players aren't really feeling it, that says a lot. Again, let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat and the comments. If you think Erik Ten Hag is the right man for the job, tell me why. Why? Tell me why I don't like Mondays. Tell me why you think he is. fine. I'm open to having that discussion with anyone. I just want to know what you think, what you're seeing, and why you believe this manager can turn this around. And I hope you're right. I just don't agree. Joshua says, I just don't know how getting rid of Erik Ten Hag. Also, if you don't want clubs carving you open, make a tackle. Lol. John Carberry says, I'm 45. At this rate, I'm going to see another 20 United managers in my lifetime. Steve Rolfe says, too much backroom staff overcomplicating things. Someone else saying Ten Hag in. Sean Easton says, if you love Ten Hag, sing 7-0. Wellbeing says, is Tuchel somewhere right now? He was interviewed for the job, wasn't he? I think since he left Bayern Munich, I don't believe he's doing anything. I don't think he's managing anywhere. And sorry, my things just stopped there. That's fantastic, that, isn't it? So yeah, he could be an option, but again, didn't we speak to him? Kevin Aitchison says, blind, deluded optimism. Ahmed S says, Jay, head looking like a well-manscaped Malteser. Thank you. On that bombshell, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you to everyone getting involved in the chat and the comments. Make sure you are hitting like, share, and subscribe. We're going to be back later on. We've got more content coming. I think you've got Uncensored coming today. Also, I spoke to Finn Academy Scoop recently, so that's going to be coming out soon as well. So hit that like, share, and subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of that good stuff. I'm Jay Motty. This has been The Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.